non-European chairman of area, that is annual bibliography of Indian archaeology. It's not very Indian, it's pan-South Asian in its coverage. And at present, Dr. Laktu Singh is the advisor to the Ministry of Culture and the Arts. May I request upon Dr. Laktu Singh to please come to the head table and assume the chair, please. Before I hand over the mic and the floor to Dr. Laktu Singh, may I once again request all of you to please put your mobile phone on silent mode, and it doesn't stop here. If you must take a call, please step out of this hall so that other people are not disturbed. I hope you will cooperate. Thank you very much. Now the floor and the mic is with Dr. Laktu Singh.
And understand, I am getting the privilege of chairing this session because Dr. Srimad Naika has not turned up. He is very busy these days, I know. So I will be chairing, and there are 4 lecturers or presenters scheduled. Each one will get only 15 minutes, not more than that, and we can have a small discussion following each presentation. The first presentation is by Dr. K.D.M. Dias. I don't know whether I should introduce. Yes, he was one of the leading archaeologists in Sri Lanka, and he was the official of the Archaeological Department of Sri Lanka. Of course, now spending the life in a retired capacity, but still very busy. I invite Dr. Dias to make the presentation. The title is Simple Cave Dwellings and mentions of royal standards for the Buddhist Sangha in ancient Sri Lanka and a cryptographical overview.
Mention mainly the donations to the Buddhist. According to these inscriptions, documented so far, the livelihood of the monks depended on the hands of the general public of the contemporary society. Their Mahinda's remarkable role of promoting Buddhism has been recognized as a national mission by people in one particular epigraph of the same period. Above all, the epigraph exhibits the exemplary devotion the Theravada extended to the cause of Buddhism and to the welfare of the island. I quote the inscription now. Je Imadipa. These are the caves we find at Mahintale, and these have been converted to dwellings. The inscription is Ye Imadipa Patamaya Idiya Agathana Idika Tera Mahida Tera today. The translation is, this is the stupa of the Thera Itika and Thera Mahinda, who came to this island by its foremost good fortune. This is about 3rd century BCE. The discovery of this epigraph in Rajagada in Ampara district of the eastern province is undoubtedly the most important evidence to establish Thera Mahinda's arrival and how he spent the rest of his life in Sri Lanka. This marks the site of a stupa where the ashes of Mahinda Thera and Vitya Thera were enshrined. Thera also came with Mahinda Thera to Sri Lanka and lived here until he died. The first meeting of the Thera Mahinda with King Devananda, the contemporary of Asoka, is described in the Chronicle Mahavansa, written in the latter part of the 5th century AD by Thera Mahana. I quote, Samanamayan Maharaja Dhamma Rajasa SAARC Tameva Anukampaya Jambudipa Dhagata. We, the disciples of the King of Dhamma, out of compassion to you, came here from Jambu. The authenticity of the Mahavansa undoubtedly has been recognized by the fact that the history of the Mahavihara and its traditions from the time of its establishment, handed from one generation to another by the monks, was right protected by the chronicle. From time to time, in the next century, erudite monks continued to write. By and large, Mahavansa has helped to settle the conflicting and confusing dates of Indian history as well. The caves converted into dwellings, sometimes protected by a lintel roof and a wall, were donated to the Sangha by kings and the people of the country. Thousands of early Brahminic epigraphs coming down from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD testified to the patronage Buddhism received by the people of all races, classes, and occupations. Brahminic cave inscriptions were period between 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD in the meeting with Archaeology. New data discovered in all the provinces still now. The donation of caves to Elder Mahinda and his companions is recorded in the Mahavansa as dwellings for the first rainy season at Hinkari by King Mahadevananda. The chronicle specifically states that 68 caves were prepared by the king at the request of Theravada. Caves were not the only dwelling that was offered to the sun. According to Mahavansa, in and around the then capital Anuradhapura, buildings of royal standards were established by the king. The first such residence offered to Theravada by King Devananda was the royal lodge in the Mahamegavada, the royal park. You see, this is an impression of one of the cave descriptions, and we take the impression from the rock. That is, apply the pulp paper and then apply ink on that. Impression comes out. It's real and also different types of graphic characters you find in these inscriptions. There had been some scribes at the very beginning when the caves were inscribed, but later on the people themselves went and inscribed on rocks, and steps and various. The donation of caves to Elder Mahinda and his companions is recorded in the Mahavansa as dwellings for the first rainy season at Hinkari by King Devananda. Caves were not the only dwelling that was offered to the Sangha. The first such residence offered to Thera Mahinda by King Devananda was the royal lodge in the Mahamegavana, the royal park. While the chronicles lay emphasis on the colossal buildings constructed by the kings, such as Devananda and Uttaya, they, with their queens, had donated caves inscribing their names under the blue letters. Quote, Gamani Utti, Devananda Maharajaha, Jaya, Sumana Deviya, Dene, Agata, Anagata, Chaturisa, Sarasa. It says, King Uttaya, and his wife, Sumana Devi, have donated this cave, those monks who came from four quarters. Some scholars such as Sindrat Palavitana, Lakshman Perera, Walter Rahler have made speculations about donations of cave dwellings to the Sangha and have established a consensus of flawed opinion that the caves were donated to the Sangha to spend their time in meditation. Palavitana observes, I quote, "These caves and inscriptions indicted in them prove that there were numerous members of the Sangha who were so earnest about their spiritual culture as to take up their abodes in caves in secluded spots and spend time in meditating." Walter Rahler notes, I quote, "A cave thus appointed was a residence pleasant to live in for a person of unsophisticated aesthetic sense and quiet temperament. It was besides an ideal place of deep meditation." Lakshman Perera, who had been a senior lecturer here, speculates there were, however, large institutions such as obtained in Anuradhapura and also simple collections of caves removed from the haunts of men in which the monks lived their lives in meditation. Few of the epigraphs recently discovered can be treated as prima-facie evidence to the identification of caves as vasavasas or reigning retreats. As a practice laid down in the Vinaya, coming down from the Buddha's time, the Buddhist monks resided together in caves during the rainy season. Donation of caves to spend the rainy season for the recluses of various faiths could be traced back to the time of Emperor Asoka and his grandson Dasalatha through the epigraph as well. In the Bharata cave inscriptions of Emperor Asoka, the Ajivakas, mendicants, were the donors. I quote, "Laja Piyadasi Ekunabi Sati Vasabhisite Jala Gosagama Tatanu Yam Kubhas Supiye Dinner." When King Priyadashi had been anointed 19 years, this cave in the very pleasant Kalatika mountain was given by me for shelter during the rainy season. Next one, Dasalatha's Nagarjuna cave inscription specifically states that the caves were given for the mendicants who reside there for the rainy season. Wahilika Kubha, Dasalathena, Devanapiyena, Anantanyam, Abhisitena, Ajivaketi, Bhadameti, Vasa Visithiyaye, Visithe, Achatandana Surya. The translation is, when King Dasalatha, the friend of the gods, had been anointed, these rainy retreats were given to the mendicants who reside here for the rainy season. A few records found among the early drafting cave inscriptions found in Sri Lanka can be treated as prima facie evidence to the identification of caves as ruined buildings. One of the inscriptions mentioning as a ruined building. Text of the inscription at Yatahaleda in the Kegod district indicates that the Sangha were living in the cave during the Vasa season or the rainy season. Sivanagarasi Hatake Gamani Sivena Dine Vimalanasi Vasavasa Samani. A lot in the Sivanagara has been given by governing Siva for the benefit of the monk who resides observing Vasa, rainy season, in this cave. In another inscription at Halabagara, in Kurunagara district, mentions the cave as a rainy season. Uttara Kwavi, Sateraha Pumiye, Niyate Vasavasi. The tank of Uttara and the water cistern of the edge of Uttara have been dedicated to the Vasa residents. The caves were temporary abodes put up for the rainy season and were given to the Sangha of the four quarters with the stereotyped formula Agata, Anagata, Chaturdisa, Sadasa. The monks coming from the four quarters, present and absent. Inside underground the cave, simultaneously mansions of royal standards mentioned as Pahata or in Pali is the old single term as the Pali word is Pasada or mentioned. In the early draft, the epigraph have been constructed for the benefit of the Sangha as evidenced in the chronicles and architectural remains. Mahavansa describes the establishment of Mahavihara by King Devanakirtisa in the Mahamekhavana, the royal park dedicated to Sangha. We get all this information from our chronicles, Mahavansa 24. Here Mahinda fixed the boundaries and the king marked the limits of the Mahavihara in the ceremonial flooring. Here indicated the various buildings that were necessary for a complete monastery. Therefore, it can be assumed that a skeletal plan of the Mahavihara was drawn with the intention of having the Bodhi tree, the Thuparama Stupa, and Uttagara, and refectory with more emphasis on the residential buildings which were referred later as prasadas or mansions. This is the original Mahavihara monastery plan of it. This is the Mihinthale monastery complex. We can identify as a building of royal standard or prasada. It was known as Loha Mahapasada. This has been originally put up in Devanakirtisa and later in Duthugamu, Gudavetan put up a 9-story building for the Pustaga. It has been mentioned in the Chronicle Mahabharata. Thank you.
Are there any questions or any suggestions, observations? Yeah.
The Roma fire was restored by Parakram Bahu, providing 9 floors, and he kept 1,000 monks permanent resident in that building.
Yeah.
I do not know of a building in any other part of the world at that time which had 1,000 people. 1,000 monks would mean not like a layman living, but a monk had to have particular arrangements, so it would have been a very generous provision.
But in Bulgaria, there were 5,000, Professor. Remember? There were about 5,000 people residing away when flying came to Sri Lanka.
But we didn't have nice stories. But this Lower Mahapathara had nice stories.
Yeah.
And it was burned down one time and was restored again.
And it was called Lower Fire because the tiles were made of copper.
The tiles were copper. The tiles.
Any other observations? Or else we can go to the next answer. Paper is by A.W. Kamala Vandani, I think.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chitramaya Tarangani from Department of Archaeology, University of Peradeniya. Well, today I'm going to talk about the relationship between Buddhist monasteries and trade guilds in the Indian and Sri Lankan context. I would like to introduce the research topic. You know that in ancient India, Buddhism emerged in 6th century BC. Since that day, when Buddhist monasteries were built up by donations which were done by lay devotees, we can identify that among them, trade guilds had given donations. Well, let's go to Sri Lankan context. As well as in India, Sri Lanka is same. In Sri Lanka, Buddhist philosophy was introduced by Arhat Mahinda III in 3rd century BC. Since that day, the Buddhist monasteries were built up by donations which were done by lay devotees. Also, we can identify trade guilds had given some donation to the monastery. In here, I'm going to discuss the relationship between Buddhist monasteries and trade guilds in Indian and Sri Lankan context. Let's see the importance of these research topics. You know that Buddhist monasteries have been playing a great role, which is religious and social relationship between lay community. Well, excess of this role, we can identify another relationship. In here, we can identify the social value of the Buddhist monastery. That's why it's important to discuss this topic. The objective of this research paper is to identify the financial relationship between Buddhist monasteries and trade guilds. This diagram shows the methodology that I used for fulfill the objective. In here, I basically use epigraphic and numismatic evidences. Well, let's go to the discussion. Before going to the discussion, I would like to define what is an investment because it may help to understand the discussion. As it given here, the investing money or capital in order to gain profitable returns, interest, income or appreciation in value. When I simply explain it like that, if someone invests money in monastery, he expects to gain profit from the invested fund, as well as institute may also get profit from the invested fund. Well, let's go to the discussion. Relationship between Buddhist monasteries and trade guilds in Indian context. In here, Nasi cave inscriptions and Junar cave inscriptions provided some evidences about the financial relationship of Buddhist monastery. Nasi inscription number 12 mentioned about an investment on weavers killed. It mentioned that 3,000 Harshapan had been invested in 2 weavers killed. Also, in Arctic inscription number 15 mentioned about an investment 1,000 Kahapanas. Kahapanas is one of currency. An investment done by the Potters Guild fabricating hydraulic engines and oil mills. Well, we can identify numismatic evidences about the financial relationship. According to Gupta and Hardakar, great scholar in India, they mention that stupa symbol or mountain symbol, we can identify this symbol in Panchmark coin. This symbol appeared in Rampura inscription. In this point, we can hypothesize that some trade guilds had given donations to the monastery, and as well as they had established their symbol in the monastery. Chunar cave inscription also provides some evidences about the financial relationship of Buddhist monastery. Inscription number 20 mention about an income generated by field into another village and invested for the school of Upper Tibet. Also, inscription number 24 mention about an income from a field and invested for planting currant trees and banana trees. Inscription number 27 also mentioned about an investment of money and it's done by bamboo workers and kilo bracelets. In here, we can argue that why such people inscribe this kind of inscriptions in monasteries. We can hypothesize that some trade guilds had invested money in monastery. Well, let's go to Sri Lankan context. As I mentioned earlier, in India, we can identify some evidences about the relationship between trade guilds and Buddhist monastery. But in here, Sri Lanka, there are little bit evidences about the relationship of trade guilds and Buddhist monastery. We can identify such as Puga, Pugiyana, those are, according to Professor Sarah Paramithana, those are mentioned, those words indicate about trade guilds, but those of some inscription like Vada Eluvara Kanda mention about donations, not investment. However, we can identify from these inscriptions from these inscriptions the financial relationship. Western inscriptions mention about the investment of gold calendar, and also Angkor inscription mention about an interest of a donation for the Archaeology festival. In here, it mentions that 40 Kahapan had invested by one of Potter, leader of Potter, maybe leader of Potter Guild, and another person other. In here, it mentions that මේ කහවණෙහි වෙඩගෙන අරින වසකරවලින්. Whether means interest. In here, we can argue if it is interest, how could be it a donation? So, we can hypothesize this is maybe a investment. Well, slight description of Kashyapa also mentioned about officers and who had got loans, money as loan. In here, we can identify that monasteries had given money as loans to the lay community. Well, finally, I would like to conclude my presentation giving hypotheses and conclusions. There was financial relationship between Buddhist monasteries and trade guilds. There they had invested money in the monasteries. Traders may have got loans from the monasteries. Monasteries may have got a profit from the invested money. Monasteries may have been used as banks. These are the references.
Congratulations. Yes, please.
Maybe I think I'm from the beginning, but when did that start? You know, when was the earliest evidence that monasteries have been, you know, established a financial relationship? And do you have more on just those inscriptions which you showed to us, how the relationship developed and what the monasteries were giving or had to give in return? So what was the return on investment?
Your first question. In Indian context, we can identify 1 century BC to 2nd century, 1 century BC to 2nd century AD.
1 BC, starting in what?
In Sri Lanka, 8 and 9 AD.
So, quite late.
But they are coming in Brahmi inscriptions. So you...
I would mention that the Tonika is the best history in Sri Lanka about the investment by Mercantile Guild. And they invested grains and got the Undu Thala man and or other things like the research we given to the monks. And the money was taken from, the grains were deposited. And the interest of that was given to the earlier our monastery.
Thank you.
That's it.
That is what century is
So that when you use Brahmi inscriptions, you can say 6th century or 8th century because Brahmi letters, end up in 4th century.
After the 7th century, but actually they were all transitional draft, we call it transitional draft inscription.
Okay. So the dating is that. But for me, when we talk about guilds and the relation between temples, we have to have more information. But until such time that we come to a conclusion, because Sangha is a very tricky situation, organization. There is Vinaya. We have to ask whether Sangha were involved in trade guilds.
And also using money.
Yeah, so just
Using money, I say.
yeah, using money. When I was a 5-year-old girl, a 10-year-old boy, I had to go with the related priest as Aditya. You know why? The bhikkhus did not touch money. But now, because of these modern universities where bhikkhus are enrolled and the employment of the bhikkhus and all these things changed that system. But up to the 20th century, Sri Lankan priests were not even touching money. Am I right, Professor? So, in a situation like this, at the beginning of the Sangha or Sangha in Sri Lanka, we have to think carefully because it's Theravada Buddhism. In the Orthodox pure form, whether they were involved in business and trades and guilds and all this. Just because there is a reference for a guild and the donation of each interest to the temple, that cannot be an indication to say that there was a guild connected to the establishment of the temple. So that is my humble, interpretation or explanation. But I think the audience is full of much more authoritative scholars. These can enlighten us.
Well,
nuances that there were basically lands donated by the kings in support of the monastery. So obviously there were trade relationships that supported the monasteries. They didn't stand alone. I mean, there were lands given so that they would be, so there were trade deals.
Yeah, you have time because next speaker, our colleague, Professor Prashant has to turn up, so we can use his time also. Yeah. Yes, please.
The military description of being the fourth. The king orders some funds available, be not taken by the post, not given to the royal treasury, but deposited in another place, which gives the impression that there is a kind of bank being operated.
Yeah, they are also banking, but not. No, my question is, where it located? You know, people can have a bank. Yeah, that's very good. As Dr. Nayak said, the best known bank was reporting the theological inscription of the 4th century. We are not money. The grains were deposited, and from the grains got an interest. So, yeah, there could have been banks or guilds. But my question is the temple has any connection to this great guilds? Of course, the great guilds may be donated to the temple.
What I understand from the Vinaya is that there has been a person always from the Buddhist side, a person to be in charge of the robes. So there would have been a person who was in charge of money, even money. That cannot be mentioned in the Vinaya, but specifically the Vinaya says about the robes, because the robes are distributed to the monks by that person who was in charge of the robes.
No, definition.
Yeah. So there would have been a person who was in charge of
No,
money.
in charge, doctor.
But that is a designation actually.
Yeah.
I have a designation.
Yeah, that designation define the job of a person, but that is different. Bank. But
So what I want to answer
bank.
that's the reason actually, because the monks didn't want to touch money at that time. There had been a person, but he was also a monk always, who was in charge of these and things. So he would have been distributing everything.
Yes, please.
I would like to mention and suggest discussion on the relation between Buddhist monastery and Sri God in India and Sri Lanka. But that was in ancient time, we as students investment in financial on behalf of the monasteries and trade guides and patrons India and Sri Lanka. And also as a Buddhist monk, yeah, as a Buddhist monk, so when a person who never touch money, what kind of money? A monk who touch the things. That is the reason why, because you mentioned Garbana and Pali word Garbanas. That is one thing a money. When the money December, dollar, or your country currencies or something like that, that is money or not, you can invest. Yeah? And however some investments, the man who can tell, as a student who attend the university without money, how to attend the modernization and so reasonings and logical reasoning, how to attend a university as a student. And the connection with the investment of the monastery in Trikite in India and Sri Lanka. That is my suggestion.
Yeah, please.
So I'm very grateful for this very impressive paper. Now my mind was widened. Thank you very much. I have 2 points. One, brilliant idea to have the hypothesis listed. Have you considered sharpening criteria on basis of which you decide whether a hypothesis is answered or rejected? For example, the penultimate point, monasteries may have got a profit from the invested money. Have you considered the notion of profit? What constitutes a profit? 1 rupee, or maybe there's some cut-off point that one does not bother about some gain unless is sort of a return on investment ratio is being reached. So that's an invitation for you to consider in the future specifying the criteria under which given hypothesis continues to be valid or needs to be rejected. Second point is a possibility that monasteries might have operated as banks, but not necessarily for just the money. They could be a grain bank, or oil bank, or a textile bank. All these things which would allow technically avoid the restrictions on handling the cardinal coins and ingots and so on, but nevertheless would be carriers of wealth. And then it's a question of the management of wealth and management of resources by the monastery and the associated organizations. Thank you.
After the
I'm Dr. Rahman. My question, another, have you any discussions with you completed? Second question, your searching inscription, have you any image under your inscription? Any image or any inscribed animal? Your inscription underline. First portion inscription or alphabet. Then some inscription have some animal or some sign. Have you any animal?
You think that there was one sign in one of the
without alphabet.
In these inscriptions that are mentioned, Nasik, Junar, and Sri Lankan inscription, we can identify a symbol, but Gupta and Hunter that greatest scholar in India, they mentioned that the Stupa symbol, if not we can say mountain symbol, which belong to Panchmark coins, this symbol can appear. This symbol appear in Rampura inscription.
Yes.
Therefore,
you have no seen.
In
this as your inscription.
Sri Lankan.
Sri Lankan inscription there is no. Oh, thank you.
But
that lady first.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I think what we are all forgetting is the Rajapara system associated with the temples, because when the Buddhist temporalities law was established and with its amendments, they consider these things as reference. So I know in like places like Temple of the Truth and then Samal Devalaya, until about 30-40 years ago, the temple lands were cultivated by people. So the interest these people paid, in some areas they gave food according to whatever the system which was established with that particular family. And then in
especially in Samadhyamaya, there were Rajapari workers for the temple. They cultivated the temple lands, and then in return they had a service for the temple. Like during the procession time or certain times of the year, these people, families came and provided their physical service in return to the temple land. So I think it would be interesting to see if the information from these inscriptions relate to what we know of the later, the Polonnaruwa and post-Polonnaruwa period literature has references. So it will be interesting to see whether there is any relation or whether we can analyze it from the data we have now, colonial period, post-colonial period, and also Anuradhapura period, because we also know that temple land management, the Buddhist monks in especially the larger monasteries are automatically required to know about temple land management. So there is a training within the student and teacher the student-teacher relationship. They pass on the knowledge because some of these are not written. So those are the things I think we need to look into if we really want to interpret the Anuradhapura inscriptions in relations to monastic investment and things like that. Because these things were happening until 30-40 years ago. Thank you.
In this, the hypothesis, the word of bank is somewhat giving the misleading impressions to us because we are drawing the banking in the present our context. So originally both the fund were reinvestment made, but it was I think it was a philanthropic act. That no monks or the devotees were involved in this type of any action. Only thing is that having surplus resources with monastery, some tradesmen were giving assistance to the monastery, taking that fund and giving some donations and rewards on these things. And second thing is that in individual level, there was no motive behind that to make the profit as it is in the present banking. So the motive was not the making profit but to assist the trust with the surplus from this. I think so banking is one going to use like that. Thank you.
Any other objection or explanation or idea? Yeah. As both of them, try to enlighten us. Okay, one more. Yeah.
Because we have time.
Yeah, we have time.
I'd just like to add, I live in Thailand and I know many monks, but when monks travel, or when I travel as a monk, always, a monk travels with someone, a lay person, and it is the lay person who handles the money and whatever accommodation, whatever is needed. So I've never seen, I have never seen a monk so far handling money, but of course there are, and there are also in Thailand many monks who not only handle money but other things as well. So I guess maybe it is the human-to-human factor in the human being, which even with all the teachings of Buddha could never be eliminated. So it is a fact of life. But of course, a monastery cannot function without a management. First of all, a monastery house is being built, the material, everything, and it has to be managed. So maybe indeed what you were saying is the terminology we use today has to be reviewed in terms of the times at that time. And so maybe we have to, not to be too terribly critical of the financial relationship, as the monasteries have to exist. The monks have to have food, they have to live, they have to do things. And it is natural, and it says in the, for example, the Mahabharata, the people have to give the best to the brahmanas or to the monks. So they will give whatever they have. And then who indeed does manage what the people give. Everything is part of it, and just maybe you may take up and try to review some of the terms you have been using.
Sorry, here I am not consider this financial relationship of Buddhism. It's not. I think it's not a bad thing, because we can identify from these the social value of Buddhist monastery. How Buddhist monastery contribute to economic aspect of the society. Therefore, I am not consider this is a bad thing. I am not consider this is a bad thing.
I think we can conclude now this because we can't very far. Then the importance of the lecture is we go. But whatever it is, I can go the center and we can. And it is an encouraging situation that young researchers are dwelling new directions, but I would like to cause, tell them that they must be very cautious before deciding or before coming to a conclusion. Be cautious, because especially in case of Sangha, in a country like Sri Lanka, you must be very cautious and dig into the very depth of the problems, knowledge, and get it correct, and then only come to the audience or public with that, because this is a very, very, very tricky issue. I don't say that handling money by university big gurus is of course not a problem, but at the time of early period, we were discussing situation through Brahmi script. Early Anuradhapura period, after the introduction of Buddhism by Mahendra, 3-4 centuries after that, it was the situation of Sri Lankan temples and priests. That is the problem. So be very cautious, and I congratulate you for the exercise. And I think all of us, even especially our Swamis, are ready for the break. I thank you all and conclude the session.